think in the back of our minds, we're all thinking that, well, I'll be earning, my earnings will only grow and grow. And by the time I'm 50, I'll be earning enough to be able to put decent amounts into my pension. And if you can, absolutely great to be able to do that. And you're much closer to being able to access that money, of course, as well. But it may not work that way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm here today with Andrew Oxlade, my colleague here at Fidelity, to talk about the moment when you can expect your earnings to hit their peak level. When does that moment arrive? Why has it changed in recent years? And how should you adapt your financial plans to take account of it? Before that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, join the discussion in the comments if you want to do that. It really does help others find what we're doing here. And it means that you'll get new content as soon as it is released. That all said, Andrew, welcome along.
Hi, Ed.
Let's start, shall we, with an explanation of this concept of peak salary. What is it and how is it measured?
So there is data available, official data that shows our wages and gives you what is basically a sort of lifelong curve of your earnings.
Yes.
And that is a very important thing in financial planning to understand. If you can understand that, it helps you, devise the way you're going to save and make sure you can do all the things you want to do in your life. Now, the peak. So if you look at this data, it shows the points where you're going to earn the most and the least in that curve. And it's as you would expect, as in you earn less at the start of your career and then it rises up, but then it hits a peak and then falls towards the end. And that's the crucial bit. It does hit that peak, possibly earlier than you might be expecting.
Yeah. And look, we're going to get into the, how this fits into financial plans. But I think, we often assume that you just earn more and more and more and more. But the reality, as borne out in the stats, as you say, is not quite the same as that. So the question is, where does the peak salary age land at the moment? Because it's changed, hasn't it?
It has, yes. And as a 52-year-old, it's a little depressing for me. But so basically, it's now 47.
47 years old.
47 years old is when you're, as an average, or as a median across all of the data, 47, as in across all industries, etc., is 47. But that's actually improved. So it was 40 5 years ago, and it's improved from 38 10 years ago.
Which is. It's 47, I think, will be a surprise as how low that is for a lot of people. But that number's come up quite a bit in recent years. These are averages, very, very broad averages. So there's a lot to unpack in those kind of headline numbers. What kind of effects are going on underneath the surface that might mean that that peak is lower, younger, and has been younger in the past than it is now?
Well, I guess, there's quite a lot of factors to talk about. The caveat we should put on this, of course, is there is a pinch of salt, which is that this doesn't necessarily mean that your personal earnings will fall or flatten. It is possible that they will, and I'm sure anecdotally people will know friends who talk about that, or they change jobs and find they can't secure the same salary as they did previously. That's definitely a big part of the story in this. But there is the other element where people are working for going part-time, and those part-time roles may pay less, and that again affects the data. Because you see it, basically the curve hits 47 at the peak, and then it sort of steadily declines all the way through, even beyond what is the retirement age at the moment, or the age you can access your pensions, which is currently 55. It's happening before that. So it's not just about retirement. It is that kind of change in working practices. But I think you're also getting at it is the trends underneath the data. And we can see there's a sort of a male-female split, for example. And so
women have had a peak salary age typically younger,
so sort of 34 and 10 years ago, and then rising up to 44 for this data, which is actually 2023, this data. But so 10-year rise. So we're seeing some trends there. The earnings gap between men and women has closed in that period. But it also, women are probably having children later, so that may affect it. And also there may be that trend of improvement really in seniority in workplace, where employers are trying to make more of an effort to equalize what's been a very unfair system for many decades.
Yeah, a lot of it just feels intuitive, doesn't it? You can imagine that sort of age, sort of mid 40s, sure, you're going to get people that leave the workforce for whatever reason. That's the kind of most extreme example. But there will be people that reduce hours. There might be people that have had kids relatively young in life and are like, do you know what, I don't need to support the kids, so guess what, I don't need to earn as much, I'm going to work fewer hours. Working fewer hours tends to go hand in hand with a lower hourly rate as well. Shouldn't be that way, but it kind of is that way. You see that affecting the gender.
Talk to the ONS about that. They said that's definitely a thing.
So you can see these numbers, and and anecdotally, as you, without specifically saying how old I am, Andrew, I'm in the window. Let's say I'm in the window for all of this. And I see it among my cohort of friends as well. They've got a sense, and they see it in the companies that they work in, that, if I were to lose my job now and suddenly have to go out and look for a new one, you can tell it's going to be harder. And there is rules and laws against ageism in the workplace, which probably help these numbers and push that peak salary age later. But there's sort of, less tangible reasons as well, aren't there? That, it's harder when you're older to get work that's as well paid as it once was. Absolutely.
So there's probably a bit of, there's a bit of choice and there's a bit of compulsion in this, isn't there? As in some people, there's no choice. They're finding jobs. They're not as well paid as the previous job. But for others, it is a choice. And to your point, it's also things like mortgages can fall away as people get into their 50s. If you don't have that huge cost that people face from a mortgage cost, then that's another reason why you may just choose a career that's a bit more suited to the lifestyle you want to pursue at that age.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, here on the pod, our focus is always people's savings and their investments. And this idea of peak salary is very relevant to that, isn't it? Because, well, typically, if you want to save and invest, you've got to earn that money in the first place. It's really worth people thinking about this likely profile of their earnings. You don't know it in advance for sure, but it's worth knowing what can happen to earnings, because I think a lot of people assume that it's just going to go up and up and up and up, and their saving is just going to go up and up and up. It might not work out that way.
No. And we always say the sooner you start, the better, and that sort of early retirement thing. But I think in the back of our minds, we're all thinking that, well, I'll be earning, my earnings will only grow and grow. That's and by the time I'm 50, I'll be earning enough to be able to put decent amounts into my pension. And if you can, absolutely great to be able to do that. And you're much closer to being able to access that money, of course, as well. But it may not work that way. And so this comes back to then, and the article we've written online on the Fidelity website, and I've written also for the Mail newspaper website, covers all of this. And it has those sort of calculations. And it is really stark to show that difference between A, starting early, and B, just putting in that extra amount, if you can afford that extra amount in your 20s and your 30s, and almost sort of future-proofing yourself regardless of what might happen. But one of those things that might happen is an early peak salary age. And so therefore, if you've got ahead of the game, you've given yourself other options, and you don't need to suddenly then pull lots of levers in your 50s.
And those are the people that I think this will land with quite a lot. People in their 30s, actually, because they, if you begin to say you've only got kind of, 10 years of sort of escalating earnings to go, and then it may well level out and begin to recede, you then really begin to look at what you're going to need to do and how much you're going to need to save. And you might, it can be a welcome kind of shock. And actually, it's often the people that go out and search this stuff and actually are quite focused on the future that could be misled by this, right? Because many of the time, you'll go out and look for advice on how to save and forecast your pension savings in the future. A lot of those forecasts often are predicated on rising wages into the future, and it may not work out that way.
Yeah, rightly so. They do that because that's the likely pattern for most of your career, fortunately. But there is a point when it may not be, and that's exactly right. You use those tools in the best faith of. That they are brilliant at trying to give you a plan, but bear in mind that dynamic of it, where it assumes that your wages will rise by 2 or 3% each year. It may not be the case forever, and so therefore you may want to put your own buffer in to try and account for that. It's even worth, if you've got a financial advisor, that's a sort of question that you should be taking to them as well. Of have you accounted for the fact that I fear that my earnings may peak
or you may not want
in my early 50s,
continue growing, or you may not want what goes with that, which is more commitment to work, more striving, more kind of, all of that. A lot of people will want that to kind of like ease through their kind of later career. Which brings me, Andrew, to the final thing I really wanted to touch upon today, which was how this fits into plans for people's working lives. You've advocated an approach that you've called chill, career happiness to inspire longer lives. Now, that's where people begin to think a bit differently about their kind of later working life as a means to give themselves a bit more of a rewarding life, basically, both financial, but in other ways as well. How does peak salary fit into that framing?
Well, the chill thing, yeah, I mean, I called it a movement at the time. I think I'm still waiting for a big... yeah, it's a movement of a few of us at the moment. But, I mean, that was born out of the kind of... It was an antithesis to the FIRE movement, which is the financial independence, retire early. So save everything you can, 70% of your wages saved away, and then you'll be able to retire at 45, 50, 55. Largely a sort of very American-driven movement, but has spilled across to the UK. And I just thought, the other way to look at all of that is this chill approach, which is career happiness inspires longer lives, and that's about finding work that's going to give you that longevity. So try and work longer, and you can work longer if you love work. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And there's a number of ways you need to build in to get there. So it may be thinking about that at an earlier age, in your 30s or 40s, maybe to retrain, maybe just to take time. If you can get what I call an optionality fund, put money aside that is for these other things that might happen so that you can afford to take a career break and retrain, maybe just to take a career break and travel. So it gives you that added longevity. You start playing around, coming back to the point on calculators, etc. You start playing around with those calculations on working longer and working maybe part-time, then that completely changes the dynamic of how much you'll need for retirement, basically. Yeah. And that's why you could argue that this peak curve or this earnings curve that you see in your life, that is already part of the chill. It's what we're talking about, isn't it? I've got a friend who lives down in Brighton who does this. He's basically just working down his hours, doing the stuff that he really enjoys. And that's going to give him longevity to carry on working for a lot longer than he probably otherwise would have done. Yeah. And that completely changes the dynamic. It's almost a kind of sort of always on sort of working into retirement, but doing stuff you really enjoy and love.
Yeah, and for my part, I think where that sort of work-life thing intersects with peak salary is that, look, this may happen anyway. So as in your earnings may begin to dip. And it's about whether you want to own that process and be in charge of it and have a plan for it and say, well, actually, it may well dip, but it's going to be on my terms and I'm going to be choosing that work. And because of that, I'm going to work longer. I'm going to work where I want, how I want, all that sort of stuff, rather than simply be a sort of victim of the peak salary thing where, your pay falls, you're struggling to get jobs that you kind of need to be highly paid. It's a different way of thinking about it and having kind of consciousness around that.
Exactly. It's taking control, isn't it? And that's, I think, what we advocate in all of this stuff is, put yourself in the driving seat, think about how that might look for you, do those calculations, think about what the career is that you're, trying to pursue and maintain, and then gear everything towards doing that.
Yeah, indeed. Look, we've covered loads there, Andrew, so I'm going to leave it for now. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. It means you'll get updated content as soon as it is released. Give us a like, share the episodes. It really does help people find what we're doing here. That all said, Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.